Hey y'all, it's your pal Archie Gamble here with a brand new edition of the Gamble Ramble. And this one is inspired by today's events, or events rather in today's news, or at least on the rock and roll news circuit. Events that happened, I believe, today. So I will elaborate. Essentially what happened was I saw a clip from the Howard Stern show on YouTube just now, about 15 minutes ago. And I believe that it was from today. I think Pearl Jam are promoting their new record. And Pearl Jam drummer Matt Cameron, who also plays with Soundgarden, is a huge Kiss nerd, like a lot of people of our generation in their 50s who grew up idolizing them. And Matt tells a story to Howard and company about how when he was a teenager, he played in a Kiss tribute band. And which those of you who know me, follow the Ramble, know that I did also for years in the late early 80s, early 90s, a band called Alive from London, Ontario. Well, in Matt's case, they were just teenage kids in the 70s, I think, maybe 80s, who did it, had homemade costumes that their moms made and so on and so forth. You can check on the link below. I'll put the link in the description for the Howard Stern show, and you can hear Matt's side of the story. But to tell you it in a nutshell, basically they got the opportunity to meet Kiss, he and his tribute band, teenage friends, and present them with some pictures. They took a photo album of pictures of the band, of their homemade costumes. And then Paul Stanley said, "Oh, that's nice." And a couple months later, they received a cease and desist letter from Kiss's manager, Bill Aucoin, telling them not to use the Kiss likeness and logo for merchandise or for business gain, right? Something to that effect. It was pretty funny. They tell a story. He tells the story decades later, tongue-in-cheek, laughing about it, and I think at the end of the day, it was resolved. It came down to they didn't want them using the logo, the exact logo. So, as I said, I'll put the actual Matt Cameron story in the link. You can click on the link in the description below to get to it and go watch it for yourself. So the reason this inspired me was that because a very similar thing happened to us with the band Alive. So for those of you that don't know me or don't follow the Ramble, I will give you a quick explanation. I am a professional musician from Ontario, Canada, and I've been touring, performing live, doing studio work for 40 years. And one of the gigs that I held for several years that I was quite proud of was I played with a band called Alive from London, Ontario, Canada, a Kiss tribute band. And we did the full recreation of the 70s Kiss show with the makeup, the spandex, the hair, the pyro, the Gibsons, the Marshalls, the pearl drums, the fire-breathing, blood-spitting, everything. And at the time, I was in the band, late 80s, early 90s, Kiss weren't exactly at the height of their popularity. And these guys, much like me, were super fans, that had held on, still loved Kiss. They much more so than me. So when I say they and me, I elaborate by explaining. The band was formed in the mid-80s by four London teenagers, two brothers, Steve and Dean Georgikopoulos, who are among my best friends, drummer Steve Sikalis, and Spiro Papadopoulos, who played bass and impersonated Gene Simmons. So if you've ever heard of Alive or seen any pictures or seen them live, you realize that they're very, very good. They took it very seriously. They spent a lot of money and time recreating the stage show and the costumes. They had things like down to the rhinestone, the same guitar straps custom made. They really didn't screw around with this thing. But it all came from a place of love. They spent tens of thousands of dollars doing this, okay? So these guys have been doing this since their teens and gradually progressing, getting better gear and getting more shows and then playing the bar circuit in theaters and stuff. And yeah, it was a business, but it was also a part-time business. They all have full-time jobs and things like that. They did it as an homage to Kiss. They loved Kiss. So at some point in time, I think it might have been 89 or maybe 90, drummer Steve Sikalis had to leave the band. And Spiro's cousin, Tom Kuzanos, was a friend of mine and worked for the band Alive, and he knew that I was a huge Kiss fan. I knew him from the other bands I was in, and he said, "Well, you should come down and jam with my cousin's band." you know all the songs, you know, it'll be fun. So I went down there one afternoon. I went to Stephen Dean's place. About that, folks, there was a technical difficulty. We're back to the story. I was going to restart from the beginning and redo it, but I'm not that professional. So, so as Tom suggested, I go down and jam with his cousin's band. And I did. They owned the drum set. They had a big, full, concert tom kit. 8-inch toms all the way to 18-inch toms like Peter Criss had. So the drums were already there. And they had these giant Ampeg bass amps and Marshall stacks in the basement of a suburban house. So I sat in with them and I counted off Deuce, the first song. And we played straight through. We could have gone straight from that rehearsal and done a show. That's how good it sounded. So they put forth the question to me. I said, well, how would you like to, be bumped up to the KISS Army from a lieutenant to a sergeant? How'd you like to join the band? Do some shows with us? And I thought, well, that'd be great. I was a full-time musician at the time. I had commitments of my own to my band that was trying to get a record deal and did eventually get one. But I said, let me talk to my guys. I'm busy most weekends working, but I'll do it in between bands as long as you realize that my other bands are my priority. Sure, why not? Let's do this. And that's exactly what happened. And it was really fun. It was great. We did a lot of really cool shows, and eventually we toured with KISS themselves, the actual band, in 1995, and the KISS convention tour. We did something like a live or a version of an amalgamation of a live and other bands. Played 8 or 9 shows on the convention tour in 95. But I digress, as I tend to do. So let's go back to what we were talking about when I first joined the band. So after I've been playing with them for a while, I could see how serious these guys were about it in terms of dedication to KISS. Like, they loved KISS so much. They would watch. First of all, they had a massive collection of bootleg live concert videos and tapes and stuff. And so we would listen to them, watch them, and recreate the choreography and the raps in between songs. Watch how Peter does this. Move your head like this. And watch how he opens the, like just little things, right? And I really got into it because I was a massive Peter Criss fan, I think, as a boy anyway. So it was a fun job to have. And I saw that these guys really, really believed in it and they loved it. And, again, in the quest for doing it properly, they spent tens of thousands of dollars. Like the proper, 75 Flying V and, the right Gibson Ripper and grabber basses and custom-made recreations of the KISS custom-made guitars, the Charlie LeBeau guitars. Just insane amounts of money went into detail. So to that end, one of the things they did was we had hired KISS photographer Joe Marshall from Detroit to come down and shoot the band. So we rented a big old warehouse that had concert staging lighting in it. And it belonged to our good buddy Al. I can't remember the name of his company, but Al and Gavin Bricks had this warehouse with a concert stage, a full PA lighting that you could rent for photo shoots, video shoots, or pre-production rehearsal for a bigger tour. So we shot with Joe all day long, and it was incredible. Joe, was a stickler for detail like the band was. We got the pictures back, and they were amazing. And then, in that department, those three it was their band. I was just basically a side band. They would ask me my opinion and stuff, but at the end of the day, it was their business. They owned it. They had the final say and everything, and I was fine with that. But I couldn't believe when we got the pictures back. They looked incredible. That day, Spiro and his brother, Tom, who was also a very talented artist, as was Spiro, I should point out, had done my makeup and wore a wig and everything, and it looked really good. And we took a lot of care and attention to detail, took time to do things properly. So they printed up a giant, I don't even know what the size, full-size color glossy poster, which I will insert here. And I think it was massive. It was huge. It cost them thousands of dollars between the photo shoot and the printing costs to do this. But again, see, they did all of this because they cared. It wasn't like a lot of tribute bands you see where, 4 or 5 older guys that get together and say, you know what? We're only making $400 in clubs. If we do a tribute to Tragically Hip or someone else, we can get 800. Which is fun. I don't put anyone down for doing that. I've done it myself. But there's a difference between doing it because you love it, you're doing an actual tribute to a band, or doing it as a business move. I did it and lost tons of money for a long time. And I explain that for a reason, because it's part of the conversation of the story. So to get to the actual story, Kiss drummer Peter Criss was coming to London to play. And I can't remember what year it was. I think it might have been 92, 93. I'm pretty sure it was one of those years, but I'll see if I can find the date. I'll Google. But he was doing a solo tour with a solo band, and Peter had been out of Kiss since 1980 when he was fired. He says he quit, but he was fired anyway. That's a whole other story. And his career wasn't going too well. He was playing a bar in a town called Kipling's. And we were all excited. Peter Criss, the Catman, was in our hometown. So what we did was we went en masse as a band down there in the afternoon in the hopes of trying to meet him. And we took down a bunch of pictures. It's like Matt's band did with the photo album. Copy of the poster and stuff. And we wanted him to see it. We wanted him to approve. We wanted him to like it. We loved Peter. We loved Kiss. That's why we were doing it, right? So I'll never forget, we got there. We managed to get let into the club. I knew the managers and owners from playing there with my other band. So I believe I took care of getting us in. And then we just talked to the tour manager, Peter's tour manager after that. And we got to watch a bit of sound check. So we presented Peter's tour manager with this packet of photos and explained that we're huge Kiss fans and we did this because we love Kiss. We'd love to be able to meet Peter. Peter had finished sound check and was in the dressing room behind us, about 10 feet away. He goes, well, I'll show them to him and I'll see what I can do. I'll show them to him and see what can happen, So he walked away with the pictures and the poster. And we waited, and we could hear. It's a little glass door partition between us and Peter about 10 feet away. Peter Criss losing his mind. He was so angry. Are fucking Gina Paul behind this? These guys are making money off my character and off my music. This is bullshit. Fucking look at him. Peter's known for being volatile, right? And we were devastated. We were crushed. We're like, oh my God. Our idol hates us, We kind of looked at each other. We didn't know what to say or what to do. And the irony, of course, is that Peter didn't own his own character. That's a whole other vlog, but he sold his rights to his makeup back to Gina Paul when he left Kiss or later. And also, anyone can play anyone's music, He didn't even own his own publishing. That's neither here, and I digress. So anyway, we're standing there waiting, and the tour manager comes out, and he can see our faces, on our faces that we're devastated. He looked like he just went 10 rounds with Mike Tyson, right? Poor guy, it was like he was trying to smooth it over, and he knew we could hear it. He goes, guys, it might not be the best time to meet Peter, let me see what I can do. We'll make it later. But we'll put you on the guest list for the show tonight. Maybe you can meet him then. And we're all kind of devastated. We said, listen, man, what's going on? I guess, well, Peter thinks you're doing this, making money off of his character and his music. And I'll never forget, Spiro said, hey, man, I work in a hospital. Like, we do this because we love Kiss. This costs us money. And he was telling the truth. He wasn't exaggerating at all. Steve Dean also worked at the time, worked for the parents. The parents owned a restaurant. And these guys put tens of thousands of dollars into this band, getting stuff done properly. And I was just a side man. But I always did my best to recreate Peter's parts. And Peter was the reason I started playing drums. Because we'll come back tonight. So we went back and got in early. And saw the tour manager. And he goes, yeah, Peter's back there doing a photo shoot, but I talked to him and he's going to take a few minutes to meet you. So we got really excited. It kind of calmed the anger down from earlier or the weirdness from earlier on in the day. And ironically, Peter was in the back doing a photo shoot with Joe Marshall, the Kiss photographer that we had hired from Detroit to shoot us. And so I'm thinking that Joe probably laid it on the line with Peter and told him, he said, no, listen, these guys are real fans of yours. They do it because they love you, and, it's not, they're not just making money a way to make money, So we were told we were able to meet Peter. So we got let back into the dressing room, and it was before the club would open, I'm 90% sure. We were all dressed up for the show, and I'm excited to meeting my childhood hero, And Peter was okay. He was, you could tell he was still pissed out, but he was making an effort to be nice. And ironically, as I said, he was just finishing up a photo shoot with Joe when we were let in. So we were watching this photo shoot. I'll try and find the photo online. There's pictures from that day that are well known in KISS circles. And one of them is Peter holding a 1970s Mego KISS Peter Criss doll, holding it upside down. That was the photo shoot that was taking place. We were watching that. I watched that picture be taken from about 5 feet behind Peter, or behind the camera, sorry. So eventually Joe stopped, and we were introduced to Peter. And he was like, God bless you guys, and blah, 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 blah. It's kind of cool. Okay, he's trying to be nice. Fair enough. So we lined up. We got some pictures taken with him. You can kind of tell by the look on my face in the pictures. I'll put one here. I'm kind of like, yeah, great, meeting a guy I idolize all my life and he hates me, So, anyway, and we made some small talk with them, and then we went out and watched the show, and then we came back to dress. We were invited to come back for a beer after the show with a handful of people in the dressing room. And I try to remember this. I'll be honest, I don't remember exactly how this happened. But I think it was when they were bringing Peter off stage at the end of the set, taking it back to the dressing room. He handed me his drumsticks. Either that or the tour manager handed them to me, the ones he had just used at the show, and said, Peter wanted you to have these. And I think it was his way of trying to make up for being a dick earlier. Right? But at that point, it was kind of the milk and sour. I appreciated it. But to be honest with you, a couple months later, I sold those sticks to a rabid KISS fan I met at a KISS convention for $250. I said, you know what? They don't have any meaning to me anymore. Not a lot like they used to. Because, the story, they say never meet your idols, right? And, yeah, you can chalk it down if you're listening. But I say, well, hey, maybe just Peter had a bad day. Well, I've met Peter several times since then. And it's common knowledge amongst KISS fans that pretty much every day is a bad day with Peter. He's a very moody person. I've had more bad experiences than good with him. Well, to be fair, I should say, I've seen him in more in a bad mood than I have in a good mood. And I've met him probably a dozen times. There's other stories that go along with that, but I won't digress that far, not today. We'll leave him for another ramble. But actually, you know what? I will kind of digress a little because this story is involved. It kind of ties in with what we're talking about with the cease and desist thing and Peter freaking out about copyright. So we played a KISS convention, Alive, being we, in Detroit that some fans had put on, and Peter was the special guest, hired to appear and sign autographs and speak. So we got to meet him that day too, and he was a little nicer that day. And he watched us play. We played outside the parking lot of a hotel. We could see him sitting up in the balcony of his room watching. We invited him to play a song with us, but he refused. We got to meet him afterwards, and he made an effort to be nicer. But on that day, and I'll try and find the date and pictures if I can and put them in here, Gene and Paul made a surprise appearance at that very convention. Now, this was notorious in KISS fan circles for years, and this kind of ties in with the whole cease and desist theme of legal theme, cease and desist / fandom / legalities and KISS theme of this vlog. I was standing it was the afternoon, and we had set up the gear, done a sound check, and then we were mingling around the show, checking out the displays. And KISS fans would gather together. These things are like fan conventions are common now, but they weren't. KISS fans were one of the first bands to organize these kind of things. You could buy vintage paraphernalia and trade stuff and buy bootlegs. And I'll never forget, I was standing there. It was at like a Holiday Inn type hotel in a couple of big conference rooms. And I'm at a table looking at some item at ground floor. And to my right, there's sliding glass patio doors. I remember never forgetting them open. There was a hustle and bustle group of people that looked over. And it was Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. A couple state troopers and a couple guys with briefcases, which I now know were lawyers. So they had heard that some of their vintage costume pieces and guitars and whatnot had been stolen over the years from the KISS warehouse that this stuff was going to be at this show, and they came to get it back. And that's what they did. I remember standing there, I was like, am I hallucinating? Fucking Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, they weren't advertised to appear. They were paid to appear. And in fact, they wanted it that way. They wanted to come and surprise these dealers. So the cops are walking behind them. They're going from table to table pointing at stuff. And the lawyers and cops are grabbing these items and putting them in cardboard cartons, carrying them out. And the people that owned the stuff, bought the stuff, were losing their minds. I bought that from so-and-so. I have a receipt. And they were like, lawyers are saying this is property of the Kiss Corporation, and serving them letters. I went and took a bunch of stuff. It turned out after the fact that they actually took some stuff that they weren't supposed to take, but it was just by mistake, and it was eventually returned. The people that had rightfully bought the stuff. And years later, it was revealed that what had happened was in the late 70s and in the 80s, former Kiss manager Bill Coyne, who had sent the cease and desist letter to Matt Cameron, ironically, had been selling Kiss paraphernalia out the back door of their warehouse. He had a really bad freebasing crack cocaine habit, and he went through his millions. And then he started selling costumes and guitars and stuff. And that's how this stuff, because for years I couldn't figure out how this stuff was missing. And Paul Stanley said in his book, he'd go to the warehouse, knowing he had a guitar there, go to get a particular guitar, and it would be gone. I'm like, that's strange. Dozens and dozens of guitars, you know. And one or two would be missing that he was looking for. So that turned out to be the root of that. So in this case, Kiss had every right to reclaim this stuff, which they did, you know. And I remember fans giving them grief. Even that day, saying, this is bullshit. That's not their stuff. I said, it is their stuff. It was stolen from them, and they're legally taking it back. The band is a business. So it became your business and started stealing fixtures and machinery and stuff, calling it their own, walking out with it. Just because it's costume pieces and it's related to rock and roll doesn't mean it's not a business equipment. It is. And it belonged to the business of Kiss, the Kiss Corporation. So yeah, there we go. A couple quick stories about Kiss legalities and the legalities of being a Kiss fan. And please check out the link in the description for the Matt Cameron interview. It's really cool. Where he talks about his case. It's a similar thing, but a little different because they were literally kids, 13, 14-year-old kids, with their moms had made the costumes for them, were driving them to gigs. They were just doing it out of super fandom. Alive was a more mature version of that, but from the same place. It was guys that loved Kiss. I did it as an homage, right? So check out the link below, and thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you are new here, please, please, please do me 3 small favors. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, please subscribe below. I come here periodically when the mood hits me with rock and roll road stories about my career and experiences I've had. And thank you. And remember, shout it out loud.